Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. The movie that I like to talk about today is from 1940, and this is The Letter, and this is starring Bette Davis in one of her most famous roles. And this is the second film of three films starring Bette Davis that I've been covering, and my last video was on Jezebel from 1938, and my next one will be on The Little Foxes from 1941. All three of these films were directed by William Wyler. These are the three films that they collaborated together. Bette Davis often said that William Wyler was her favorite director, that he taught her more about film acting than any other director. And they also had a affair during the making of Jezebel, and she was very much in love with William Wyler during this period of time. So the letter opens with a sign saying, that we're on a rubber plantation outside of Singapore, British territory, and we get a very famous and quite effective opening shot. It is a tracking shot in which it's nighttime, it's very hot, sultry would be the word, and the camera tracks along where the workers are resting, they're sleeping, they're playing games, talking with each other. It's a very slow moving tracking shot, and then we see a house off in the distance, and we hear a gunshot. Camera moves closer. We see a man stagger out of the house down the porch steps, and then we see a woman emptying a revolver into this man at fairly close range as he lays on the ground. This is Leslie Crosby. So this is Bette Davis, and she is wild. Her eyes are wild with anger as the camera approaches her. So the authorities are called, the constable comes, and also the family lawyer comes, Howard Joyce. This is a very important character in this movie. The constable shows deference to Leslie. She's obviously been under a great shock. And Leslie tells the story that this has been an attempted rape. The man she has killed is a member of this expatriate British community. He was thought of as kind of a womanizer, but it seemed odd that he would be also a rapist. She claims that he was drunk, and so she had no choice but to fend him off with the revolver that was close at hand. Of course, the question remains, why did she keep shooting him after she shot him the first time? And Bette Davis, Leslie Crosby's demeanor suddenly becomes cool and calm. This is a character who can go from emotional explosions to cool and calmness in a matter of moments. And she begins the first of her three confessions. This is a film about confessions. And it's a film about the depiction of the British in Singapore and in their colonial possessions. There's clubs, there's drinking. It's pretty much a life of privilege, although Bette Davis, Leslie Crosby's husband, is a really hardworking guy. He is the manager. He doesn't own this plantation. He is managing it. And this is and he is sort of the husband of Leslie is very much a part of W. Somerset Maugham's world. This is based, the letter is based on a short story which I read a few days ago by Somerset Maugham called The Letter. And it was also a play, a very famous play starring Catherine Cornell, one of Bette Davis's stage idols, who I don't think, ever made a movie. Maugham spent a lot of time in these British colonial territories looking for subjects for his short stories and novels, and much of his stories revolve around adultery, betrayal. I have to talk a little bit about the book. I showed this a little bit, Bette Davis by Barbara Lemming, which is basically a biography of Davis's personal life, but she does have a lot of stuff about the films, including this era of Bette Davis's career and her collaboration with William Wyler, which is so important. And although I came of age as a movie lover in the late '60s, the time of the auteur theory, and I was very much an auteurist, which focuses on the director as auteur. But I'm a great believer, and also as the actor as the auteur. And I think Bette Davis, when you read this novel and you read about her personal life, Bette Davis, although not a method actor, I don't think she might have been acquainted with Stanislavski, but the method is still another 15 years away. But she brings, when you learn about her personal life, and then you watch some of these films, you can see the dramatic power of Davis is of course in her technique, but also in her belief in what she's doing. And so when she was a young girl, 10 or 12, her father had a longtime mistress. Her mother was clueless about this mistress, and then he all of a sudden one day just left. And the mother was devastated. Bette Davis was devastated. He went and married, and divorced his wife, and married another woman. And this betrayal really stuck with Bette Davis. It was like the traumatic moment of her childhood. And then when she marries her first husband, who was a really good guy. He was sort of like the husband in the letter. She does the same thing as her father did. This first husband was very supportive. He was fairly normal guy. That was the one marriage where it wasn't all about brawling, drunken brawls as some of the other marriages of Bette Davis would become. But she felt guilt over that, over what she had duplicated exactly what her father had done to her mother. And of course her technical ability here plays into that. But as far as her movement, in the letter, it's the movement of her hands. She's always fidgeting with her hands. She's always knitting lace, and that's her go-to, her go-to activity to calm herself down. And again with Wyler, we have such a brilliant mise-en-scène. The way he photographs all these scenes. Wyler was accused of not being an auteur by the auteur critics in the 1960s. He did not bring a personal view into his filmmaking, according to these auteur critics, as the auteur hero directors like John Ford, Orson Welles did. But what Wilder did was allow his actors to convey the emotion of the movies and of the story. And certainly Bette Davis was just, this is the peak. This is 1940s absolutely peak section of Bette Davis's film career. And also the way he blocks the actors. So we have scenes of confession, these 3 confession scenes. And part of one of the confession is when Bette Davis actually turns her back to the camera as she's delivering this confession, which we don't, is it true, is it not true? Which was a nod to Catherine Cornell, who Bette Davis, as I said, idolized and saw her performance, knew her performance very well in the stage production of the letter. And then we have in Jezebel, in the final sequence, we have Bette Davis, Jezebel, looking up at her beloved's wife, and she beseeches him. And one of the confessions here, the final confession, is with Bette Davis on the floor looking up at her husband. And there's a great deal, and you see this all through the movie, the way Wilder places actors throughout the scene. So throughout the scene that he's filming, and how much meaning and how much interest can be found here. He was also always known as a kind of deep focus director. He wanted everything in the background to appear as distinctly as the foreground. He has a great cinematographer here, Tony Gaudio. And of course, we get the marvelous Warner Brothers set design here. And then I got to talk about James Stephenson, who plays Howard Joyce, the lawyer. James Stephenson died a couple of years after this. He never achieved any renown outside of the letter, where he did, in fact, receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. But this movie is basically, although this is a Bette Davis vehicle, to be sure, this is really kind of the story of the lawyer, Howard Joyce. He is sort of the stand-in for the audience as he listens to Leslie's first confession, and he wonders, is this really true or not? And we're wondering too. We don't know. We don't know what we can believe out of Leslie. And Stephenson was not a star. He wasn't even. He was just a supporting actor. But I've read elsewhere, if my memory is correct, and Bette Davis had either performed with him on stage or she was a friend of his, and she really wanted him for the role. Warner Brothers saw how large a role Howard Joyce was. They wanted a star. They said, "Why are nobody knows who this guy is, and this is a big part." They might even say it's as big a part as Leslie Crosby part. Wyler liked him. He liked him a lot. They rehearsed some of their scenes. It's understated. It's so subtle. He gives just a marvelous performance here, and it's really a shame that he died shortly after this and never got a chance to play another significant role. He does his support, and Bette Davis was a great admirer of the actors that she worked with. Faye Bainter in Jezebel, for instance, who played her aunt and won an Academy Award. Bette Davis said, she really enhanced my performance. And I think James Stephenson does that here as well, as he struggles to understand who Leslie is. And then there is the titular letter. Is this letter real? Is it fake? How does it play into Bette Davis, Leslie Crosby, who was on trial? She, in fact, murdered a man. So, the court case is, do we believe Leslie's confession or her story about the attempted rape, or is there something more to it? And when the letter comes, of course, we get that we get that dimension to the story. And then I have to mention the ending, because this is one of those movies, sadly, that the ending is determined by the production code. So this ending is not in Somerset Maugham's short story. It's not in Somerset Maugham's play. It just, we just can't do this. You got to come up with something else. So they do, in fact, come up with something else. And what they came up with was pretty good. And the man who Bette Davis kills had a wife, and she's played by Gal Sundergaard in a very scary-looking role. And so that all comes into play in the final ending. So even though we get, the morality, the morality that the American public needs, because otherwise, if we see endings that the production code frowns upon, well, mass immorality might break out. So again, this was a big hit. Bette Davis, from Jezebel on, there's like 10 or 12 movies in a row, big hits for Bette Davis. She was considered the great dramatic actress of her generation, and every film was making, from Jezebel on, just about every film was making money for Warner Brothers, who didn't treat her very well. And she fought them. Well, maybe I'll talk a little bit about her struggles with Warner Brothers, where she was a contract player for, I guess, about 18 years. So next up, The Little Foxes, from another play by Lillian Hellman. Thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.